Hi guys, I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Stephanie Verdoia, one of the attorneys on the House case that's going on right now. If you're a student athlete or you just pay attention to NCAA athletics right now, you've definitely heard of this House case. And if you haven't, thank God you're listening to this episode because you need to know what's going on. Stephanie, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Do you mind just starting with explaining the case and what is going on?
Yes, absolutely. The case called House originally is an antitrust lawsuit.
Okay.
And what antitrust lawsuits are is they're lawsuits where you're basically asserting that businesses or competitors in a competitive marketplace are violating competitive principles. In the House case, we're asserting plaintiffs have alleged that the NCAA and the Power Five conferences broke the law by creating anti-competitive rules that restricted compensation for college athletes. And so that could be in the form of compensation for NIL, compensation for competing as a student athlete, and then also for limiting scholarships.
Wow, that's a big one. And you said it happened in 2020, and then I believe name, image, and likeness passed in 2021, but you were still able to keep the case going. Is that correct?
Yes. So we filed in 2020 and big Alston Supreme Court decision came out in 2021 as well. Some of what we were able to actually get as data for the reason of why the NIL rules were anti-competitive, because now we had all this information about athletes actually benefiting from NIL. And we allege schools and the NCAA fixed the price of athletes NIL at $0. And then 2021 happened and clearly NIL isn't at $0. So
I want to kind of help out all these athletes who are getting all this information to file a claim. I've been getting emails, I've been getting texts from group chats of people like, "Hey, fill this form out." What does filing a claim mean?
it's legal lingo in class action settlements, which is why it sounds a little confusing. So I'll break this down. In class action settlements, there is an assumption that if you are a class member, which is defined in the lawsuit. So in this case, it's Division One student athletes from 2016 all the way to September 15th, 2024.
Yeah.
If you fall in that bucket, you're a class member and you are by default in the class. So it's not an opt-in. Some people think filing a claim means, okay, I'm participating in the settlement. What it means actually is that you're essentially applying for the benefits of a settlement.
Okay.
It's most obvious in a case like a defective product case where you have to prove that you bought the product. So filling out a claim means I'm actively participating in the settlement and I'm asking to apply for the benefits that I might be eligible for.
Okay. Thank you. Can you walk us through the process of filing a claim then for an athlete?
Yes. So there's a settlement website that I'll probably reference a lot in our discussion.
Great.
It's www.collegeathletecompensation.com.
Okay.
As you said, there's a lot of information out there about this settlement. This is the only information that the court has approved can be pushed out to class members. So you want to go to that website. There's a button that says claim your share, and you click on claim your share. And there's a few questions, and the questions are to help to distinguish what kind of claim form you need to fill out. It'll ask you if you are a Power 5 athlete on scholarship. And then the second question is, do you have a claim ID and PIN or your NCAA eligibility center ID?
Okay.
That part's important, and a lot of people are getting confused by that because you will only receive a claim ID and PIN if you received our notice. We call it notice. So we sent out notice to as many student athletes as we had the information for. Unfortunately, right, that goes to old school email addresses that people don't have access to, or physical addresses that they had while they were at college that maybe have changed. So a lot of people received claim ID and PINs. Some people didn't. Because of that, you can also fill out a claim form by having your eligibility center ID, but you need one or the other to fill out a claim form.
And then when it comes to filing a claim, I've heard in the past with other lawsuits that joining a class action suit could mean that you can't join similar ones in the future or you can't participate in lawsuits in the future. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's a great question, and it's really important for class members to understand this. Every settlement releases something. That's kind of the agreement, right? The defendants are like, okay, we'll give you money, but we are not going to be sued for this again. So athletes that meet the definition who don't opt out cannot bring future lawsuits for claims that are raised in this lawsuit. So
Okay.
for example, You file a claim form for this lawsuit, you want to receive payment, you don't opt out by January 31st, which is the deadline, then you can't bring your own individual lawsuit for NIL compensation that you should have received from your school. One of the easiest examples is there's that Johnson case right now about student athlete labor. And in our settlement release provision, we explain specifically you being a part of that lawsuit or the future remedies for that lawsuit, is not impacted by being in this lawsuit.
Okay.
So the only things you're releasing are the claims that are raised in this lawsuit, which is related to compensation from the NCAA's previous rules and scholarship limits.
Okay. And athletes can opt out on that website you sent as well?
Athletes that want to opt out need to send a letter to our settlement administrators with a signature that says their name and confirming that they want to opt out. And so the address to send that is on the website, but you can't necessarily do it by just going to the website.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll make sure that we include that website and kind of those three options that you have in the resource page for this specific episode. Let's talk a little bit about the risks. A lot of people kind of see this as student athletes kind of getting back at their schools or the NCAA. Is there any risk for student athletes' eligibility for filing a claim?
No.
Okay.
No concern of that.
And then how and when will athletes receive compensation from this?
This kind of leads into the whole dynamic of preliminary approval and final approval of a settlement, which can be complicated. When a class action settlement happens, you have to apply for approval from the court. The first step is preliminary approval, and the court reviews a settlement agreement, reviews the briefing, and decides preliminarily if they want to approve the settlement. If they do, generally that is viewed as an indication that they are likely to grant the settlement. We have to go through this notice process. You have to do the claims process. It's a lot of work. And so when you start that long process, there's an indication that the judge will grant final approval. Now, that doesn't always happen. And I am not in the business of predicting judges' decisions. So I can't tell you whether or not it will be given final approval. But on April 7th, 2025 is when we have the final approval hearing, where Judge Claudia Wilkin will hear what's happened in the months since she preliminarily approved the settlement. After she makes that decision, there will be a period for appeals. And so assuming she approves and assuming that there's no delay in those appeals, payments could go out in this year. And again, a reminder that payments will be coming once a year for 10 years.
You know, usually when athletes receive any kind of compensation, they're taxed on it later. Is that something that will happen? Will they be taxed, and will they be taxed every year?
We are not tax experts, so we are working on getting the resources to provide some more clear direction for athletes on that coming up. But in terms of initial assumptions, we do think athletes will need to pay taxes on this money.
Wow. So this is, again, thank you so much for coming on, because you go in these comment sections and I think everyone means well, but sometimes it's like assumptions and things that people don't always exactly know. You have to think that some athletes might benefit from this kind of more than others, especially when it comes to thinking about gender equity in sports and how popular different sports are. Is that true? Do you anticipate that some athletes will benefit more from this than others?
Yes, that's definitely true. One of the, I would say, limitations of an antitrust lawsuit is what we're alleging is that the free market of an economy has been impacted by restrictive rules. And the way you fix that is by removing those rules. It doesn't mean that you get to change what the economy is, essentially. And so again, this is all kind of like backwards looking of like what the environment, what the economy would have been like for those athletes at that time. So you can see how different sports will be eligible for different amounts based on, you know, where their sports broadcast. What years did they play? Did they compete for 4 years? Were they on scholarship? Things like that will impact the amounts for each athlete.
And then how accurate are these calculators? Is there any way to know?
So I would exercise caution if there's calculators out there on the internet that are not coming from the settlement website. Essentially, it might take a bit if you just upload it like claim form, give it a minute. But we're trying to give athletes an idea of how much they will receive in this settlement, with fees and costs pulled out with all the athletes that have filed claims, but it's an evolving process because the claims period isn't done.
Yeah, that's great advice because I'm seeing people who are, getting like thousands of dollars, and I don't want anyone to, yeah, plan to pay their rent with this
Right.
settlement.
And again, because it hasn't been approved.
Great. And then I'm just wondering, like, for the industry, exactly where is this money coming from in the settlement? Is it your individual schools? Is it the NCAA?
Yeah, that's a good question, and probably better explained by the NCAA and their
Okay.
schools. But in kind of agreeing to the settlement, they created a process of how they would fund the back payments and like the future relief going forward, which is kind of this new revenue sharing model. And so, in order to agree to the settlement, the Division One board and other entities had to agree, and so they created a financial plan in place.
That leads us into future conversations on Let's Talk About It about the relief section of the settlement. And honestly, really just a lot of speculation because we don't know exactly how the case is going to finalize in April.
Stay diligent, stay informed, and I hope it works out the best for everyone.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sydney.
Hey guys, it's Sydney. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. If you did, make sure to leave a review and send it to a friend. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you guys next week.